Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Napoleon, and today I'm back again with talking about the new upcoming Enlisted factions. And basically, if you've been living under a rock, then you would have realized that Enlisted is going to revamp the entire progression system and only add factions, of which there are going to be confirmed at least 5. And there's not going to be a ton of campaigns, which is what a lot of people have been asking for. Of course, I did cover about that in my weekly news video, so if you want more information, please do check that out. But that said, this video today, we're going to be talking about how Enlisted should be best implement these new factions, what weapons they're going to add, and what potential issues that I see with these factions. But that said, without further ado, let's get started. Of course, this video, once again, has been made possible for friends at Discord, meaning that if you haven't subscribed or joined the Discord, highly suggest that you do. But that's it, let's get finally started. The first faction that we have is Germany. Yes, let's start with potentially the easiest. For Germany, I don't see a lot of issues. I'm expecting a lot of early war rifles for Moscow, such as the G3340, followed by the baseline German rifles, the Kar98K, and then their semi-automatic rifles, which is the G41, the G43, and finally their full automatic rifles, such as the FG42 or the FG42-2. In this way, their SMGs are going to be very similar, with MP28s followed by MP40s or MP38s, and then the MP35-1 and the MP43, and then the STG-44. In terms of the tanks, the Germans are really going to have the Panzer IIs, Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, Tigers, Panthers, etc. The same regular timeline progression should also occur with heavy weapons and planes, so I'm not really going to be spending too much time on that. Needless to say, Germany is probably the easiest progression that Enlisted should not be able to mess up. Also not going to be hard since Germany is in every single faction, so that's going to be interesting. The next faction that we have are the Soviets. The interesting thing about this faction is that we have an example of what this progression actually looks like, with Enlisted actually offering us somewhat of a roadmap, or at least the first half. The faction will basically start with a lot of bolt action rifles, such as the Mosin and the Mosin carbines, and in their rifle line, followed by their semi-automatic rifles, the SVT-38, the SVT-30, and finally their full autos such as the AVS and the AVT. From what we know, the SMG line is actually more similar, with the PPD-34 followed by TOS-B, the PPD-43-48, and the PPD-40 followed by the Papa Shot and the Fedorov. Their tanks start with the early war T-60s, followed by the T-26, BT-7, T-28, and eventually lead up to, preferably, the T-34, the KV-1, the T-34-85, the IS-1s and 2s, which are going to be interesting. Their planes are a jack of a trade with a lot of bombers and fighters, of which the bombers are actually more interesting because the Soviets actually have very good bombers with heavy bomb loads. This goes with their heavy equipment, which is going to be more like the Germans with their anti-tank rifles, flamethrowers, and mortars. And like I said, this is one of the only progression that we have a glimpse of. Honestly, this is the branch I expect people to grind out the least with the flamethrowers and mortars, because there's not a lot of heavy equipment for a lot of factions, since you are going to have a lot of them anyway. But with the Soviets, we have a pretty good progression, and since they do literally have one of the biggest progression trees right now, and they do have 3 campaigns as of the game right now, so I'm expecting the Soviets and the Germans to have very easy progression lines, and they are basically, Germans and Soviets are all-rounders. Next, we have the United States. As compared to the Germans and the Soviets, they are going to be slightly harder, and I say slightly, not completely, because they do have a lot of good stuff. For their rifles, they are getting their Springfields, followed by the M1 Grand M2 Carbine, their line rifles, and in their rifle branch, in their SMG branch, we potentially have the M50, followed by the Grease Gun, followed by the M1 Thompson, and variants of the Thompson. Now, this section I purposely left ambiguous, because as of right now, a lot of the Thompsons that we have, or should I say the better Thompsons, we have for the British in Tunisia, or should I say the Allies in Tunisia. And whereas the Americans mainly basically use the M1 Thompson, the current situation enlisted is that a lot of the better Thompsons are in Britain, or with the British, and I really hope that Enlisted adds the British, so I'm going to leave this part particularly ambiguous. Their tanks are going to be the early MGMC in the Pacific, the Stuart from the Pacific, followed by other Stuarts in the Normandy campaign, a bunch of Stuart variants, and then you have the Shermans and the Jumbos. As of right now, I highly suggest that Enlisted launches this campaign, they add another tank called the Pershing, because as of right now, the Soviets have their IS-1s and IS-2s, the Germans have their Tiger Es and Tiger 2's Porsche, and honestly, the Americans really need a heavy tank. I preferably not to give us the Pershing, because America, at this point, really needs a Pershing, and because although the Pershing wasn't at Normandy, we are moving into a faction, and Pershing really will be needed for the Americans for their late game. or else their late war tanks are just going to be looking straight outright like Shermans and Jumbos, which is not bad, by the way. In terms of planes, the United States is completely maxed out with having some of the best aircraft in the game. For those players in Normandy, Axis, and Normandy Allies, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to talk about their heavy equipment, which is not a lot, but is still pretty good. Like, I'll actually compare their heavy equipment with the Germans and the Soviets, because that's how good they are. Overall, the United States has only a few potential issues, and that is their SMG line and their late war tanks, of which the SMG line I particularly left ambiguous. But that said, that is all it for the United States, a really good rounder. Next we have the Japanese, and this is where things start to get harder. As of right now, Japan has a very interesting progression in terms of having bolt-action rifles and semi-automatic rifles, and not a lot of full-auto rifles. Of course, if you are interested in learning about having a full automatic rifle, then you can watch this video. It's about the 20-round Hiei automatic rifle. Yes, you heard me correct. A 20-round SG-42 for the Japanese. Needless to say, as of right now, the Japanese have no fully automatic rifle. Their submachine guns are very lackluster, with pretty bad damage compared to late war weapons such as the Papa Shah, and their heavy equipment is probably the most covered progression, but that's it. Their tanks are abysmal, their planes are decent, but not as good as the Americans in my opinion, and that said, Japan is really lacking in their full-auto rifles, late war SMGs, and should I say better SMGs. Their tank situation, like I said, is really bad, and basically what a Sherman is going to do to any Japanese tank is just going to one-shot it. Therefore, I really hope that Enlisted adds a lot of new weapons for Japan, which they do have in the game file, surprisingly. Since they do need a lot of new stuff to compete with other allied factions, such as the Soviets, and particularly the United States. As a matter of fact, as of right now, if Japan is going to be added against the Soviets, they're going to get one stomped. Of course, you guys are going to be telling me that there's going to be a tier system, and I really hope that Japan is going to be either under-tiered or Enlisted just adds new stuff. Finally, we have the Italians, and I say finally with an emphasis on not finally. The Italian progression tree should look a lot like with Carcano rifles at the beginning, followed with semi-automatic rifles. At this point, I hope really Enlisted adds new semi-automatic rifles for Italy, such as the ZH-29, put it in the Italian tech tree, because that's going to be really helpful for Italy. Not to mention the fact they don't really have a lot of semi-automatic rifles, and fully automatic rifles, which looks apparently that is the norm in campaigns like Berlin and Normandy. In terms of their SMG line, they have pretty good SMGs such as the Beretta M1918, OVP 1918, M1 and M38 Berettas. The only issue I have is that as of right now, they're being split into multiple campaigns. For the Beretta M1918, they have that in Normandy and they have that in Moscow, so I really hope that they put the Italian SMG line in place. The Italian SMG line should look something like the Beretta M1918, the OVP 1918. Either which of them comes first is alright with me, because technically if you wanted to go historically, that is pretty much OVP 1918, because it's an OVP 19 of Villa Peschiera. It's basically a VP cut in half, and the Beretta M1918 is a modified version of the OVP 1918, followed by the M1 and finally the M38s. Do not quote me on the Beretta M1918 and the OVP part, because I am not particularly sure about that. I only seen some documents supporting of what I said, but that said, that is the Italian SMG line. Of course, against the Fedorov, we're going to be seeing an issue, because the Italian SMGs are not going to do very good against Papa Shahs or Fedorovs. However, their tank line is also particularly bad, in the sense that they can't even stand up to IS-1s, IS-2s, T-3485s, or Shermans, because their tanks are particularly bad. The only best one they have is the Scimavente tank destroyer, which at this point is very useful. Their historical counterparts actually have the P-40, which at this point I'm really hoping Enlisted adds more tanks for Italy. Their planes are also interesting with no bombers, but unlike the Japanese, but they do have a lot of good fighters, which like the Japanese but also unlike the Japanese, because the Italian fighters are actually pretty good in my opinion. In my opinion, they're actually better than the Japanese fighters. You can debate that however you will. Their heavy equipment is almost non-existent because they don't have any mortars, they don't have any anti-tank guns, they don't have any rocket-propelled rocket launchers, whatever you want to call them. Therefore, all of the factions that is basically confirmed in Enlisted right now, Italy is probably the most incomplete but not weak, since you do have the Beretta M38. This is because they have massive holes in their progression, with some lines or subtrees being non-existent. That said, they also have no late war equipment, which is going to be a problem. After that, we have the British. Now, of course, the British have not been confirmed. Italy has actually been confirmed from some sources I have. And the British is going to be another faction like Italy. I suggest adding them in. Like the Italians, they're going to have a pretty good bolt action rifle, but their semi-automatic rifle and fully automatic rifle are like non-existent, except for in the premium section, which I'm pretty sure at this point Enlisted is not going to be adding because they want your money. I'm going to leave that how that is to your will. Their SMGs are exceptionally amazing with the drum mag Thompsons, the box magazine Thompsons, and etc. Unlike the Italians, their tank core is pretty much the 813 Grants and Fireflies, so that is actually pretty good. Like the Americans, they don't have a lot of late war tanks unless you want to add in the Comets, the Cromwell, or the Centurions, which that is up for debate. But in terms of planes, they have exceptionally good planes, even bombers, or should I say, viewfighters. In terms of heavy equipment, they really have everything, notable exception of the Boyd anti-tank. They really don't have anything except for that, much like the Italians. Therefore, I highly suggest either adding new equipment or just literally down-tiering them, and this goes with Italy and Japan. Now, as of right now, as you can see a trend, we're going to have the big three, Germany, the United States, and the Soviet Union. These guys are going to be the backbone of every Enlisted game, and as of right now, it's literally looking like that. But that said, guys, that's all it for the factions. What do you think of the factions? What do you think we should do? Do you think we should add new weapons? Comment in the comment section down below. Or do you think we should just down tier them? Once again, comment in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Discord, and have a great day.